Hi everyone. Hi there, and welcome along to our session today, which is focusing on setting HR up to create value in Flux. I have got the one and only LinkedIn famous, TikTok famous, let's be honest, Emma Jamil with me. I'm so delighted that she is with us today because she is absolutely my go-to expert when talking about team function, energy, cohesion for HR teams. So whenever we started talking about doing this masterclass together and working on it, I was a bit delighted really that she would work with me on it. I'm a bit surprised really that she still talks to me in public because she is so famous on these things. Do you want to say hi, Emma, after that introduction? I've not made it awkward at all, have I?
Not remotely awkward.
I feel like it's the only way that I know how to function on these things. Well, I'm wondering, rather than just doing my awkward introduction where I make myself look like your weird fangirl who's checking where you are on Google Earth all day every day. I'm too busy for that. But a couple of times, maybe a couple of times a day. I wonder if we should do a bit of a professional introduction of ourselves so everybody knows who they're talking to today. So I'll go first if that's okay, and then I'll ask you to do the same. So I'm Paula Brockwell. I'm an occupational psychologist and I'm the founder of the Employee Experience Project. And basically, my day job is working with organisations to be disgustingly pragmatic when it comes to creating the ways of working, the operating environment that allows people to show up the way that the business needs them to. So I'll call it culture work, and me being a massive culture nerd, but it's really about that bit about making pragmatic differences in businesses. Emma, do you want to introduce yourself other than being my victim of stalking? Who else are you?
I love that I now know that you watch me on Google Earth. I am delighted to be here, Paula. Thank you for inviting me along to have a chat with you. I equally could talk to you all day and always learn so much from you. So it's nice that you think that I have something to contribute as well. And if you haven't met me before, then my name is Emma Jamil. As Paula's already said, my business is Be Unstoppable, and I focus really with individuals and within HR and also HR teams to operate with trust and confidence and strategic clarity so that we can be credible and commercially minded and drive sustainable business performance. And I mess around on LinkedIn a bit.
Well, yeah, what I love about what you do is that unwavering belief in the value of HR and how I see the work that you do as really unlocking other people's belief in themselves, because I think that that it's a really hard job. Certainly that's my experience in working with HR teams. It's a really challenging job working with HR and working within HR, and it's hard to keep your sense of self and your sense of value because so much of the world is telling you that you're not always as valuable as you can be on things. So yeah, I'm delighted that you're here today to kind of to share your insights with the people joining us. So I'm just going to talk you through what we're going to cover on this session. So let me talk to you a little bit about what to expect as we talk things through today. And in the meantime, while I'm talking to you about this, heaven forbid I ask you to do a couple of things, I'm just going to pop a question into the Q&A section, which is asking, today's session is about, how do we keep our impact when an organisation is in flux? So I'm just going to ask you some of the top excuses, reasons, whatever you want to call them, that you hear within your business for delaying critical people projects. So what are the barriers that are hitting you or getting in your way for being able to move this stuff forward? We'd love to hear what your view on that is, because I think today's session is about recognizing that I think as HR professionals, we do hit a huge number of barriers to just getting on with our job. It looks like, I think a lot of the time, our work is the thing that's seen as it sits beside the day-to-day operations, and therefore operations need to have the bandwidth to work with us. So they need that calm or not now or whatever it may be. And so today is a chance for us to really explore this piece of, well, there is no peace anymore. Let's be honest. Let's talk about that challenge of constant change. We're going to explore that a bit. But then we're going to frame the conversation around Emma and I's separate specialisms. So I'm going to talk to you first of all about this idea of how we really frame the people agenda as an everyday priority, and how we can engage and influence our leaders to make that happen. And Emma's really going to focus in on this piece around, for you as a team, how do you create the conditions for your team to create value? So what does that actually look like? She's going to share her awesome, spoiler Emma, Rebel framework, and talk you through what you can do as a team to really support and prepare each other and create the conditions for you to be able to drive success on that. So I could talk to you for ages about what I see around why it feels so challenging to move the people agenda forward in Flux. Certainly, my observations are, as someone who partners a lot with HR teams, that a big part of my job is about helping those teams create the visibility, the priority at an exec level. And sometimes a lot of what I'm doing actually is emperor's new clothes, in terms of I'm from external and there's a day rate attached to me, so I must talk sense, which is kind of annoying. Often the first question I ask in a project to the HRD is, what is it that you've been saying for ages that nobody's listening to you on? So what is it you want me to say to try and get people to have a listen? So some of my job is about that, but I think also my background as a psychologist, but also just my personality as being disgustingly pragmatic, is about bringing that priority of how do we express this stuff in the language of business. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about some of the challenges around that. But I think it's worth inviting Emma to share a bit, as someone who has worked in-house in HR, as well as kind of supporting lots of different HR professionals and teams, to talk a bit about what she sees as some of the challenges. So what do you see, Emma? Talk to us about this.
Yeah, you're right. I've spent far too long in HR. My whole career was background in HR, and now I'm supporting, like I've already said, professionals working within HR. And I think it's always been true that there is this like imbalance, or this conflict between the strategic work that we want to be doing and the reactive work that we want to be doing, or that we have to be doing. So quite often organisations will say to us, we need you to be doing this XYZ strategic stuff, and then also, like an example from my career, can you also like hand sign the birthday cards that are going out to people, because that's really important that people get that personal touch. You're like, well, which one do you want really? So there's a firefighting, something that we're always reactive to, which is often created by the mismatch between what's been promised within that organisation, whether that's written or assumed. So whether that's promised by the organisation to the individual or vice versa, we're often the ones who are expected to navigate and react to and respond to that mismatch and that conflict that happens when it does. We're also trying to support the overwhelmed leaders who are dealing with the complexity that we're also experiencing, and they don't necessarily understand or their scope in things. So we're trying to guide them through that, whilst also not knowing what we're meant to be doing and they're not knowing what they're meant to be doing. And so there's a lack of clarity a lot of the time between again what an organisation says they want and then what's actually happening in real life. And what this means is that there's not really the time for us to take a step back. There's not a downtime. It's constantly moving from one thing to the next, like get one project done and then the business has already moved on to another one. So there isn't also the time for us to build in that learning of the things that we're dealing with as well. All the while often being under-resourced, both by whether that's technology, whether that's people, whether that's the support that we've got available to us, the information. How often are we called in at the last minute to deal with things that have already been decided? So our sphere of influence is low, and of course we're dealing with an environment too where there's a lack of awareness sometimes of what we're doing as a profession and what we're there like really responsible for. We're there for the tea and sympathy, but actually you want all this other stuff and then you don't really want that. And so again, there's a lack of clarity, a lack of about what it is that we're even there to be doing as a profession. So is anything coming in on the Q&A, Paula, about like barriers that people are seeing? Because I can't see.
Yeah, we've got a comment. So we've got a comment from Lauren. Oh, lovely to see you, Lauren. Stress and firefighting around the day-to-day work and lack of resources, people and money.
Yes, because again, I should have put budget on the lack of resources that we have, because again, if we do have a budget allocated to us, which isn't a guaranteed, isn't a given, then do we have the authority to actually spend that money on the things that the organisation is telling us that they need to do? So it's hard in that environment in that context as an HR department to move things forward. You're at an individual level, that puts pressure on you because there's a frustration, and then that leads to the same within teams. Engagement is hard to sustain, both within your team, and then if you're trying to engage people and you're not feeling engaged yourself, that's going to be hard for you to then drive that change happening outside of your department. And then honestly, I don't think it makes us particularly productive, because we are firefighting and we're constantly trying to keep up. Leads to as we're seeing within the HR profession, individuals feeling burnt out, disillusioned, undervalued, overlooked, overworked. And a lot of us are leaving the profession as well, not to get too grim about things.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think Claire, lovely Claire Hodges, has added a comment here as well around a lack of understanding of how long some people projects actually take. So that drive for the silver bullet is an interesting thing, isn't it? So even when we do get the bandwidth, or maybe not the resource, but we're expected to flip things really quickly and unpick stuff that could be decades old in terms of its building around the habits and experiences that people are having, or totally out of our sphere of influence, but we're expected to fix it with a little band-aid and maybe a pizza, if we're lucky, a budget for pizza for one of the teams that's really mad. So yeah.
Pizza fixes everything. It's true though, isn't it? It's that like lack of understanding. People, I think there is a lack of awareness of how complex some of the things are that we're dealing with. So it's like, and when you're not in the room, when those decisions are being made, it's hard for you to, people are like, well, let's just get this done. We know we've set our time frame. You need to crack on and do it, without understanding that people need to be taken on a journey. You need to. There are processes, there are things to dig into, and because it's people, it's just a conversation. The perception is, oh, that's an easy thing for you to do.
Yeah,
and we all know that it's not. But then trying to communicate that outside of the department as well is also tough going as well. So
yeah. I don't know about you, but I've certainly noticed the inevitable shift that happens. I've been doing this a bit too long now, that I feel like the people agenda and the focus on it is like a seesaw, and it all comes down to what's happening within the talent market. If it's easy to put bums on seats, if there's more candidates than there is jobs, well, they should just be lucky that they've got a job, and we don't need, it's all about business needs and priorities, and how do we eke the next 20p at the EBITDA level. Or whatever it may be, or save that bit on the budget. Where the talent market is a bit tighter and we're fighting for people, suddenly it's all about EVP and how do we attract and keep the best people on things. And there isn't the conversation around, there might be a load of bums on the seats, but are those bums doing, let's not go, but are those people doing what they need to be doing? Are they supporting the business? So the business becomes less people centric in tough market times, when actually it often needs to be its most agile, innovative, and it needs people to be on top of the game for the business to survive, really. I don't know if you see that pattern too, but certainly in my world I see that a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And then we start thinking about, well, how do we shift the leadership paradigm? And it gets much more complex. But yeah, ultimately there's a really weird way that we interact with work and what we expect from people when we ask them to work for us. And if we could nail that, Paula, I'll tell you what, we would be winning.
there'd be, to be honest, I think there's some solutions, but if I had a silver bullet to it, there'd definitely be a palm tree behind me and a gentle breeze and someone bringing me a pina colada. I'd definitely be porting in from the Bahamas. I think I wouldn't abandon the mission, but I'd definitely do it from somewhere a bit sunnier, I think, and all inclusive. Yeah, it's interesting actually, because we've got another comment from someone who's saying that performative piece around well-being in particular, so saying that businesses will often say that well-being or burnout is a priority, but then in terms of the operating, the strategic and operating decisions that they make, they'll cut costs and budgets because that's the thing that's prioritized. And I suppose that probably leads us into the next bit of the conversation, which is how do we start to frame the people agenda so that it's always relevant? Because certainly my experience is that a lot of the time it isn't that the positive intention isn't there. An exec team or leaders want to, for example, prioritize well-being, but what they're not doing is making the connection that the choices that they make on the demands that they're putting into the business, so what they're doing in their strategic plan and what they're going after versus how much resource they actually put against that, will fundamentally have more impact on well-being than any sideline kind of well-being initiative that we do. So I think there's a real piece about us, I think, as professionals, mainstreaming our work out of what is the wellbeing policy that protects people from how this business is run into a place. If we use that example of how do we make really great choices that mean that wellbeing isn't an initiative, but it's an outcome that we're driving because we run the business in a way that's set up to allow people to sustainably turn up in a way that's required. And I guess, you know, honestly, that's my day job, is about just shifting those lenses, helping businesses to stop looking at some of these priorities as something that we'll just do as an extra, and more thinking, well, how do we bake this into how we do things? So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking to you about this piece around how do we really frame the people agenda in a way that's less how do we protect from the rubbish conditions that the business is creating, into a place that's a little bit more systemic. So let me share some bits with you on this then. So I would say that the first priority when it comes to really trying to shift this, of course, I'm going to use a culture lens because I'm a massive culture nerd, but honestly, I think that culture is at the heart of everything that we do as HR professionals. If we can set the business up to create an environment where people are enabled to succeed, all of the other outcomes that we want to get come from there, from an engagement, a well-being, a productivity point of view. But I think a lot of the time we don't, I'm going to say we don't do ourselves any favours. I don't think it's us. I think the industry sees culture as something that focuses purely on experience. Are our people happy or not? So quotes like this are ones that we'll use when we're having the culture conversation, you know, particularly the one around, I think I've got it in there, around culture is how people feel on a Sunday night. And to an extent, I would say that's true, but I'm not sure that that quote is that helpful for us, because what it does is it pushes individuals' behaviour, how they show up and how they support the organisation, down to their own personal motivation and their own ability to personally cope with the situation. And immediately what we're doing is creating this tension that says that if as leaders, we've then got this responsibility to drive an endless to fill an endless pit of need from our employees to keep them happy all the time. And I don't know if you experience that, but certainly I find that a lot of the best intentioned leaders that I work with have still got themselves into this kind of exhausted, combat-driven position that's like, well, what else do they want? What else do they need? And I think as HR professionals, we often become like the shop steward of, well, they need this to be happy. They need this to be motivated. And in the back of the executive mind, they're thinking, well, in my day, it was enough for me to get paid, or it was enough for me to be pushing for the next promotion, or whatever it is that they're telling themselves. So we're immediately creating this sense of tension and conflict that is about, are we keeping the kids happy rather than are we setting our people up to deliver what we need them to? So one of the first things I'd encourage us to start to think about is, how do we shift from how our people feel being the metric and the end goal. I'm not saying that it's not an important goal, but how do we shift the conversation from this is how our people feel to this is how our people are performing, behaving, and showing up, and how do we influence and stack the system to allow them to show up in the way that we need to. So I'm just going to share a couple of different kind of graphics. I think very visually about this stuff. So I'm just going to share this with you as I talk about some of the ways that we can talk about behavior, satisfaction, culture, the outcome of culture in a way that often connects a bit more effectively with execs. So I talk about culture as the operating system. So it is a tricky thing to describe because it's this ever running connecting system that influences itself over time. It's a bit like a soup that's been on the boil for a while. You know, it starts as individual ingredients, but they all merge together to make a flavor, and they just kind of reinforce each other over time. So it is all of the ideas and beliefs that people have about work, what good looks like around here, what we need to do. But those ideas and belief get baked in a slightly more hardwired way than I think we often give ourselves credit for. And we don't necessarily help our execs to understand as well as we could do, because those ideas and beliefs influence the decisions that we make, the processes that we build, the customs that are created. So not only is it about the soft bits of how people think they need to show up, but it bakes into the infrastructure of how we encourage them to show up and how they need to act to be compliant and effective in the system. And that ultimately then influences their behavior. The really annoying thing about culture, though, is that not only is that stuff an outcome of the culture, but it continues to feed back in. So everything that I see you doing, or every thought that I have that's reinforced by a system or a process, or how my own behavior is accepted or not, increases my belief that that's the way that we do things around here. So if we can help our execs to understand, you know, if there's a problematic behavior appearing within our business, if we can stop them from saying, well, that's just because that's just people think that they should get, you know, they deserve to get whatever, you know, they need to be treated like this to get that. So an example I often use is personal responsibility. Why are they always escalating things? They think they don't want to take a risk. They aren't willing to take responsibility. They want me to answer all of the questions. Instead of going to the symptom of that behavior and trying to shift it, asking the question of what is it within our system that is driving that behavior and we need to influence, can really help. So sometimes our framing, moving ourselves from a place of how do I fix this into how do I help this person understand this, because they're probably influencing it more than they know, is really helpful. So this piece about understanding the cycle and starting to break and identify bits of the cycle that might need to be influenced is helpful. Now, I suspect that I'm not saying at this point anything that you haven't been trying to bang your own head off a brick wall on and doing and influencing over time. So that might probably a bit of a granny and an egg situation here, but hopefully a slightly different narrative to play with on it. Another way to think about this is not just how in our own behavior do we start to challenge some of those norms within our environment and not accidentally fall into those traps, but also how do we help our execs to do this. And this graphic, nick it, use it, do what you want with it, I don't mind. This is one of the light bulb moments that I see with leadership teams in particular really often, where I have a conversation with them about what culture is, and it's how we feel on a Sunday night and all those things, and you know, whether people are motivated and engagement. And I talk to them about the fact that, yeah, that's all true, but that's the first half, not even the first quarter of the equation. Culture does drive how people feel, but more importantly, it drives their attitudes and their beliefs about, well, not more importantly, that's not fair, but more importantly to the exec, should I say. I'm giving you my exec narrative there, showing you my dirty management consultant face, but more importantly to the execs, it influences what people think good looks like at work, and therefore directly influences the behavior that they're going to demonstrate. And a really pragmatic example of that is if we work within a retail environment, it therefore influences whether my store assistant thinks that it's acceptable to sit on their phone every time someone comes into the store, or they stand up and they go and talk to the customer and help push that sale through, which directly influences business results. So if we are getting behaviors that aren't acceptable, it's not just about are people happy or not, that's part of it, but it's what is this system influencing, encouraging and permitting, and how do we start to nudge that in a different way. So that allows you to get that base understanding and that base contracting of, if we're seeing behavior that we don't like, my job is to help you understand this system and start to influence that so we're getting the behavior that we want. So suddenly we're linking the behavioral, we're linking the people agenda to how do we stack the deck? How do we prime this environment to ensure that our people turn up in the way that we need to drive that strategic goal and that strategic priority? And that kind of links to one of the last things I want to share with you around this is we've looked to really try and do that kind of, I'll say it again, disgustingly pragmatic version of how you define culture. So our ideal culture model, which I'm sharing with you here, and there's a white paper on the website that you can get to think about this in a bit more detail, and a free tool that you can complete. In fact, look at that, I've put the QR code in the corner if you want to try it, but a short 5-minute tool that you can complete to think about what the ideal mode is within your organization. But starting to frame culture not as Hofstede's model or the like, that's saying we're a clan culture or a meritocracy or whatever it may be, which is very behavioral, is kind of more experience based around what does it feel like around here. Starting to express culture with a more performance lens, where we're talking about the fact that, look, we're, as a business, we need to drive improvement at pace because everything's on fire and the regulator's about to shut us down. So therefore we need to adopt a cultural mode that's about improvement, or we need to drive innovation because we're in a really volatile market where our core product that we thought was going to keep us stable is no longer valid because a competitor has brought out something better that's really dominating. So we need to get into trailblazer mode to get ahead of them, to protect our market share or to regain it. We're suddenly able to start to talk about culture in the context of the operating challenges that the business is facing around the bottom line. So the more that we can take ourselves into that world of what is this business trying to achieve and what are the challenges that it's experiencing in achieving that, we're much more likely to be able to create that relevance around the people agenda. Emma, I'm interested in your thoughts as a former in-houser on this, of whether this connects, whether you think I'm just a deluded management consultant. Don't say that in public, but you can do. You know what? Say it if you want. That's grand. But what's your thoughts? What's your thoughts in terms of what I've shared?
I'm writing notes. I really like this shift to like performance modes. I think I recognise myself, and I see it with the people that I work with as well, is that as a profession we tend to be quite driven by wanting to help. Like that will come out quite a lot. I want to help. I want to create nice environments for people, which is entirely leaning towards how do people feel around here? Like I'm creating positive like feelings for them. And what I really like about what you're saying is like, well, that might not resonate with your exec team, not because they're not nice people and they don't care about that stuff, but because they've got other considerations that move beyond like, is everyone having a nice time? So what I like about what you're saying is that it can frame it in a way that actually allows us to have big, we get as frustrated by let's have some pizza as you have evidence that you do. So like how it's given us a language that says, if you want your people to genuinely drive the things for you as they should, your business outcomes for you as they should, then this is what we need to be looking at. I also like that it takes away that, quite often we would have to have difficult conversations that says like, when you did that thing, your behavior, Mr. Manager, your behavior manager, that had an impact. We're having to have those conversations and coach all the time. And actually, if you can move it from like your behavior to systemic behavior, that makes it easier for us too.
Yeah, for sure. And I really love your reflection there on that piece about framing. This isn't about fundamentally changing what's important to us or trying to create people first organizations. It's about recognizing that our execs are humans too, and they are in most cases not being held account to the engagement score. They're being held account to the sales growth, the profit, etc. And there's a bandwidth. There's not an intention problem here. Often, sometimes there is, but a lot of the time it's more a bandwidth challenge of that is just if we don't if we don't frame this in a way that links to the things that are in their top 3 to 5 priorities, it's never going to be supported and activated in their day-to-day conversations and actions. If we can do this in a way that shows them that this links to the things that they're thinking about all day, every day, and can enable them to deliver those, we're much more likely to give us the opportunity to get this woven in a way that's sustainable. Cool. Okay, so that's everything I've ever thought about making culture more palatable to execs, maybe. So I'm going to hand over to you now and ask you to talk a bit about working with teams and supporting them to really feel like they're able to deliver value.
Thank you. I was expecting another slide and it's gone. So
done swapsies.
And here's your palm tree. I delivered on the palm tree for you.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Halfway there.
I really like what you're. There's a lot here. I make no apologies for the fact that I very much focus on like human dynamics when it comes to like just about anything at work. For a profession that has human in our title a lot of the time, I know we're moving away from that to like people and culture and whatever, but I think we actually do a really good job about forgetting that we, as in us as in the profession, are humans, and also so too are our leaders, and you've touched on that. Like I've always found it weird. I genuinely believe that people in the main operate with positive intent. They want to go to work and do good things, so it's always really like confusing to me that people go to work and then bad things happen, and I think it's because we're human that is what happens. So I'm not going to make any apologies about the fact that that's where I'm going to be focusing. Our leaders are human, and we are human as in the individuals in the profession, and quite often we just forget that. We're like, oh, I've got a massive change program to deliver, but let me just have that really difficult conversation, then go back over here and be really happy and joyful. Like we're expecting too much of ourselves, so we can be quite blinkered about the fact that we have needs both as individuals and within our team dynamics. So change in organisations that are changing, in organisations that are in flux, we feel that. We have feelings at work, we can't just ignore them, and what we tend to overlook these human dynamics quite significantly. And I think you can have all the models, all the ideals, but until an individual level, you understand yourself, you understand what matters to you, you understand what winds you up, what your strengths are, what motivates you, that is going to dull our impact as a collective and then as a profession overall. So I think it's all of our responsibility to do that individual work, understand ourselves, understand how we interact with other people, and that's the backdrop to what I'm going to be talking about. So the question, moving on, Paul, there you go, is like when you extrapolate all those individuals that the individual reactions that we're having to flux and that we're having to change and to the demands that we have them, and then you move that up to a team level, and then you ask that team, hey, can you like drive this change on behalf of other people whilst also experiencing the change yourself? Then the question for me is like, if this change is constant, then what needs to be true inside HR teams and inside leadership for value to still be created? So when change is constant, people are carrying more than usual, particularly within HR departments, because we're in such a unique position, like I said, of potentially being affected by the change. We might be, our jobs might be at risk, we might be under like restructure, and we're also trying to support other people at risk. We're also trying to drive the culture, maintain like whatever we need to within our organisations whilst being affected ourselves. So we've got uncertainty, we've got cognitive load, we've got emotional labour, and we're always on. We've got that reactivity to that mismatch between what's been promised between people. We're experiencing that individually, but it's also the impact of that is also felt collectively. And those individual reactions of fatigue and hypervigilance and frustration and withdrawal, that all builds into team patterns. And it's those patterns when we operate at a team level that will drive whether we can create value as a function or not, or like be blocking it. So it's that interaction between what happens with people that, when we understand that, then we can create the conditions for working effectively together. So teams that are operating under sustained pressure and change, you see things like hyperreactivity, everything feels urgent, small issues escalate really quickly, people are responding before they have time to think. You've got avoidance and hesitation, decisions are slowing down, conversations get deferred. I know I need to have that tough conversation with someone, I know I need to lean into that, but I've got this other stuff to do. So things wait, and we wait for the certainty that never comes. You get fragmentation, people retreating into their individual roles, their silos, or self-protecting in the worst kind of examples of this. Collaboration drops, even though in Flux, like arguably it's the thing that's most needed. And then you get unspoken tension. So we're feeling stuff, we're all humans, we're all feelings, but we're not talking about it. And silence gets filled with stories, so which leads to trust kind of slowly, quietly eroding. And we get really good at scanning for threat, right? So we're scanning for, who is it safe for me to talk to? How are decisions getting really made? Everything that Paul has already talked about, like what we're observing, that gets baked into our experience of things. Whether raising something is going to help or hurt. And for us, creating value in that environment, predictability matters more than certainty. So this results in teams that are reactive, they're feeling cautious, they're feeling stuck, and it's high performing teams creating value in uncertainty aren't the ones that have got the least pressure. They're the ones that have got clear expectations, consistent ways of working, and enough trust between them to think together under pressure. And none of those things happen by accident. They're deliberately created. So this is the framework that I use. Paula's already told you about it. So let's move on, Paula, to the first part of this, which is it's called the Rebel Framework because I think we need to rebel against the way things are working currently. The first stage of that is, well, the framework itself is a way of thinking about the team conditions that are required for effective work in constant change. So it can support us as HR leaders through the human cost of constant change. And the first step of that is redefine. So some of, like, what role is it that we're playing within this organisation? As a team, do we understand our role, our priorities, and what success looks like in this constant flux? Do we have a common agreement as a team about what we're there to do, how we're showing up for people, how we're supporting people, and how do we want other people within the organisation to experience us as a team? So you're deliberately making conscious decisions about, like, how are we working together and what kind of experience do we want people to have of us as a department. So the next stage of this framework is embrace. So I think it's really important that we're all aware of our limitations, and this is why I talk so much about the fact that we're human. I don't think you can have impact as in your career, as a team, as an individual, without also accepting the fact that there are vulnerabilities. So there are going to be weaknesses in your team. There's going to be times when things don't go particularly well. There are going to be times when you make a mistake, this is all about, as a team, how do we acknowledge those things? How do we build in the structures and the systems to know that this is our weakness, this is where we don't do so great, but also let's really play to our strengths. And do we have the emotional literacy as a department to notice what's happening between us and where we're starting to break down, and then do something about it? Not just how we get everything done, but also like how we're working effectively together too. Feel free to jump in, Paula, if you've got anything that's like triggering, like not triggering. What's the word I'm looking for?
Occurring,
making a thought for you, that kind of thing.
Thank you.
The B of the framework is to be brave. So this is all about, if you've got that emotional awareness, if you've got about what's going on between you, then can you name that tension? Can you actually make those decisions? Can you leave behind the things that you don't need as a department that are getting in the way of you having your big impact? Yes, it might be nice that we've always done this certain thing, but is it really driving how we defined that we wanted people to interact with us? And if not, are we going to stop doing it? So it's about having the conversation conversations between you that keep things moving, rather than keeping you stuck. We've got another E of embed, and these are your regular practices to be confident that you're showing up with each other's best interests at heart. So I went to this really stuck with me about like the future of work, trust being the currency of the future of work. And trust is something that we have to create. And one of the best ways of doing that is to say, like, what do I need to be doing, both within my team and within the wider organisation, for people to know that I am showing up consistently with their best interests at heart. I think that's a really nice way of thinking about it, because that drives that individual reflection of saying, who is it that I want to be when I go to work? And did I show up in that way today? If not, what was going on for me? But you can do that at a team level as well. So what are those consistent behaviours? If predictability is really important in these times of flux, then how do we build that predictability in how we are with each other? How do we meet? How do we decide? How do we recover when things go wrong as well? And lastly, I think the HR profession, we should be leading, we should be out at the front. I think we talk too much about just simply getting a seat at the table. I think the time has gone for that. We need to be out in front, leading, showing our leaders this is how we do things to get those business outcomes that you want. So how do we, as a team, in that team environment, take a shared responsibility to stabilise the system around us? How do we think and perform? How do we practice internally as a team, and then turn this into leading other people and not being the effect of the things that are happening around us? And when HR teams operate with these conditions in place, then we're spending less energy on managing friction. We are spending more energy on that strategic work. We can make decisions faster, and we stop absorbing pressure and start helping the organisations in the way that they need us to. So overall, like I say, this is the Rebel framework, and it's a roadmap. It's very deliberately got the word rebel. I made it that way. I could have chosen any other words, right? But I've been in the profession a really long time. We keep rinsing and repeating the same stuff. So I think it's time for us to really look at doing things very differently. A step change in how we are, both as individuals within the profession, but also how we interact with each other and how we interact with people outside of our teams. And for me, that takes a little bit of rebel energy. So that's what I am totally encouraging. You do one thing today, make it be rebellious.
God, I'm absolutely in for the revolution. And I think, well, I really appreciate your reflections. I think there's some lovely clarity that you're creating in there. And I suppose one of my observations is that that a lot of what we do, in the same way as culture is kind of an unintended outcome of how everything dries together, I think often our role in HR is we end up in unintended roles, behavior patterns, etc. with the business, and it comes down, all of it can be tracked back to sensible decisions or coping or what we could or couldn't influence at different parts in our history with that particular organization or others. But what I love about the invitation, I guess, that you're giving people here is that conscious consideration of who do we want to be, how do we want to show up, and how do we drive that forward, which is massively critical, because I think without that, we just end up reacting to the situation that we're in, rather than really being able to create something that gives us the influence and control that we need. Because let's be honest, it's the HR brains, it's the knowledge that comes from there that's fundamentally going to change the world of work. There is not the knowledge, there is not the capability in any other profession that will allow businesses to evolve in the way that they need to, that in a way that links to the madness of evolution around the world of work that's happening at the moment. It's like, it's a brilliant time for me as an external professional to be like, holy moly, we are in the biggest experiment around the world of work that there's ever been, since the Industrial Revolution anyway. I think the biggest and most rapid piece of change. But I think as my heart and sympathy always goes out to people who are internally kind of caught in that washing machine as it evolves, trying to find a way to organise it as it goes. It's a bit potty, really.
And I think it's so right. Like, and we're the ones. We're doing the reading. We are thinking about future of work. We are thinking about the human impact, and yet we are still trying to prove our worth and our validity to leaders who are never going to get it. To be honest, like I say never going to get it. It's not their priority to think about these things. So anything that we can, so what we have to do, I think, as a profession is say, look, I'm not trying to prove anymore. I just know this stuff. This is my expertise. I invest a lot of myself and my time in doing this. And then if we can use that language that makes it relevant to them, so that they can see the link between this isn't just fluffy. Like, I didn't include that slide about what we should do with fluffy, but if we can move that from this is actually, your people are a key driver of your business performance, and actually have that language around that, leading that, rather than trying to prove. It's a different energy in how we show up. And then when you build that up into how you show up as a team, and you build that into your like team dynamics, that's when you potentially like can have a huge impact within your organizations.
Yeah, I suppose what comes to mind for me is the biggest challenge for us as professionals is not about having the capability to deliver value. It's not about the expertise, exactly as you say. I think the biggest challenge as professionals is more about removing the hurt, the frustration, the fatigue of not being valued in the way that we should be. And instead of thinking they should come to us, thinking about, well, how do we as a team find our energy, our capacity, and our mode to start to apply this to their context? So how do we get out of a them and us situation into a place of how do we make this water palatable to this horse, rather than continually just putting the water in front of them and going, oh, that, they like Vimto, but I'm going to keep seeing they need the water, so I need to see what's happening. Just me that is obsessed with Vimto, maybe. But I think that's the biggest challenge, I think, for certainly that I see with the HR professionals that I work with. People are exceptional. The disconnect is about we're talking about the same thing in a different language, and I think our evolution and our opportunity is how we evolve, how we talk about these things, so that we can make it feel relevant to those people in the room, for sure. So rebel all the way. I mean, let's do it. Love a revolutionary. That's why that's why we're mates. So I'm your stalker, whichever we can do. It depends how we're framing it today. So we love a revolution, for sure. So I'm wondering, we've got a few minutes left in the session, and I guess we just wanted to give people a chance to kind of reflect on what we've talked about and what you want to share. So what I'm going to do, I'd love for you to share with each other the gift of what your insight or your one takeaway is from this session today. So I'm just going to pop, she says, live typing it. What does this mean? What does this mean for you? Into the Q&A, and I'd love to hear your thoughts around how this might influence you around the boundaries that you're setting, the support that you're going to ask for, you're going to give to your own team, or what you need to do around your own capacity and energy to help yourself show up the way that you need to. So what does this mean for you? You know what I mean? I nearly typed it right when I was talking and typing at the same time. So we'd love to hear your commitments or what you'd want to share with people. Happy to take them. You slag off your chief executive, we promise not to tell anybody.
You might make a TikTok post of mine, though.
So Emma, what's the takeaway that is most important to you for people to take from today while they're thinking about what their takeaway is?
Gosh, for me, it's I think what you said about it's not a capability issue. It's about how we verbalize it, how we vocalize it. I think combine that with, can we just as individuals move away from the narrative of having to prove ourselves, and just if you were to show up as the expert, if you fully embodied that, I am the expert in my field, how would that make a difference when you show up? But also, if you are as part of a team, if you are leading a team, how can you show your get your team to operate in that space as well, not as a reactive, can you be a partner if you're reactive? I'm not sure, but as a reactive partner, but as a leader, how could you embody that as a team? That would be the thing for me.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And yeah, I think it's such a challenging environment. It's easy for us to doubt ourselves. It's easy for us to think we are the problem. And I think that's one of the things I love in your work, is that absolute sense of empowerment of let's just step back from that feeling and figure out what the reality of this is and respond to the reality rather than try and respond to our fears around things. For me, the more we can continue to challenge ourselves as professionals and say, is what I'm feeling, or is what's driving my behavior, that feeling that's driving my behavior, is that true, or is there something else that allows me to show up in a different way that might influence this? I think that's critical, for sure. Okay, cool. So last but not least then, and nobody seems in the mood to share what this means for you. I hope you're writing it down on your own pieces of paper. That's cool. You've got a minute or two more if you want to share it. Emma won't name you in the TikTok, even if she does do it, let's be honest.
It's a joke.
She's looking for inspiration wherever she gets it, but she has got morals.
CEOs though, to be fair.
Yeah. I had a video on LinkedIn today which has swears in it about CEOs. I'm sure my marketing person's going to lose her mind. We'll see what happens. So I guess the final thing for us to do then is just to say thank you for today. The intention of the session was to nudge your thinking, give you some practical tools and resources to take away. And also, it'd be remiss of us to not say, look, we're here to help, both as just human beings, but also as professionals on this piece. This is our day job. So if you do need some extra help, here's some inspiration around some of the things that we can do. We can do lots more than this, but we don't want to be in that awkward, buy something from us because we've talked to you situation. That's not about this. But if this has nudged you and you're thinking, I want to do something, but I'm not quite sure what, you want to think about the piece around how to shift the narrative on the people agenda, come and talk to me. I can support you on that. You want to do some really great stuff that's about centering, connecting your team around who they are, how they show up, and how they support each other in the business in a mode that allows them to really own and live their value rather than feel other things about it. Emma is absolutely your woman for that, so she'll be really happy to help. Have I misrepresented you there, Emma? Is there anything else you want to say?
I think what I need you to do, I need you in my pocket so that I can just record everything you say about my work and then market it that way.
Full-time marketing director. Yeah, I was bored of being a psychologist anyway. I needed a change in career, I guess. So thank you everyone for your time. Just to let you know, we will send you an email out in the next 24 hours with the recording of the session. So you'll have a copy of that too, if you want it. And we'll pop both Emma's and my contact details on there. So if you do want to continue the conversation, we'd be delighted to do it. But it's been a pleasure to spend time with my idol today, with you in public. Look, she's here. Yeah, any questions, we'd be happy to chat. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.